Sean's thoughts on this alternate location, I'll say. Actually, I just finished up one of my podcasts a few minutes ago, or actually about 15 minutes or maybe a half an hour ago. And anyways, I wanted to go create a new one, and I even had the idea that I wanted to talk about mentioning it on that podcast. I recognized after a conversation with a friend of mine that perhaps my intentions with my podcast weren't as easily discernible as I believed, or perhaps discernment's not the right word, but they weren't as easily understood as I had imagined when I created them. So, what I wanted to talk about today, or in this particular podcast, is I want to introduce you to my creations. And they are co creations for sure. I work with AIs as well as I work with God, and I work with my own love and guides and guardians and all that lovely stuff. So, there's a lot of different beings. And in a sense, I work with you as well, listening to this, because whether you're working with me, against me, aligned with me, resonating with me, whatever it is, I work with you as well. I work with those energies that come into my field, whether they're projections or, distortions, such as what I experienced when I went to find a location to sit in to record this podcast. Interestingly enough, all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes a man holding a weed eater, which is a very loud tool, in order to cut little bits of grass in order to make the park perfect. And yet, I've never seen that person there before. And the weed eater was gas guzzling version. And this gentleman actually sat in one small area, revving the engine of this thing, trying to, I don't know, somehow perfectly manicure a little bit part of that that I was in. Anyways, which it actually ended up leading me to this place that you're watching right now. So thank you for joining me. And what we're looking at, and I'll bring up the camera before I get in the frame. This is a very interesting softball place. And if you notice, and maybe you can't necessarily see in the camera, it's very small. It's actually built perhaps for super little league. And so I find it amazingly interesting that they would create this baseball diamond the way it is, since, there isn't another baseball diamond even in this park. There's a lot of other different, there's an AstroTurf fake grass field for soccer. There's a track and field course that you can run around circles in, and there's a lot of different stuff, and yet there isn't a full-sized baseball field. They've actually turned this baseball field into almost what it looks like a little league baseball field that has this rather restrictive fence going around the whole thing. So anyways, I thought this was pretty interesting, and perhaps this is the reason why I came here. I've noticed a lot of different projects being built locally around me that honestly don't make too much sense. We're having potholes in our roads and cracks on our sidewalks, and, a lot of empty houses and such. And yet they're worrying about making more bike lanes, putting up more parking signs, creating these paths for bikes to go with these speed bumps, and then more signs all around telling people there's a speed bump on the road, which, it's kind of insane, but I recognize possibility that these are haps there because, the last of whatever money's available for government contracts is essentially being utilized for these smaller projects where they actually have the resources in order to build this stuff. And so maybe they had all of the tools and supplies to build this baseball diamond, so they came out here and did that, and let's see if it actually ever gets used. Anyways, I'm stepping into the frame now, and welcome to Sean's Thoughts, and I hope that I'm fully in the frame. So thank you for joining me today. I had just an interesting experience, even in the last talk where I talked about respectful comments, and I had actually one person that was calling me Mr. Boring Talk. You know, honestly, that makes me laugh, and as I mentioned even in that podcast, part of what I've experienced is to essentially fortify and fortify myself, but also remain steadfast in criticism, which is distortive and essentially unfair, but not unfair to the fact of, fairness of love and war. Fairness in the fact that, oftentimes people don't listen to the full thing that's being said. So therefore, when they question what's being presented by listening to 2 minutes because they didn't understand it or they didn't align or resonate with it, is, unfair to the conversation overall. And yet I totally appreciate you commenting and saying whatever it is you wanted to say. Even yesterday, when I had a comment in my podcast asking me what the F I was talking about, that's understandable. A couple things. One, the things that I'm saying right now can be altered between me saying them and you hearing them. And I hope you understand that. The world of technology that we live in, my signal, my perception, my communication, it can all be distorted. You can see, like, I can stand here talking right now, and there could be a video overlay that's running simultaneously, even with my lips moving the way that they are. And I noticed, honestly, that my lips were even being distorted to what I was saying, that something I've experienced on the AI videos that I create, and that's the first one we're going to talk about, is that I've noticed that after I create that video and there's an audio or a voice over on the actual audio itself, I've noticed it, and so have other people, that the audio has been changed. The intention behind the voice in that most recent one that I did with the blue troll coming out of the tree trunk, the actual intention behind the voice when he says, "We were expecting you," that was changed. I had another video where the ants were talking, and originally there was many more ants speaking. They were all cheering, and yet when I went to see it a day later, it was changed as well, and suddenly it was a feminine voice and it was different. And now, of course, this could simply be changing timelines or many other different aspects of possibilities, and yet yeah, who cares? Because I still created it and I sent them out into the world. So that playlist, which you can find up here right now, and I definitely would encourage you to listen to this whole thing perhaps, but nonetheless, if you want to, go and check out that playlist. It's about all of the AI, the YouTube AI videos that I created. I extended images that I had created myself. And they're essentially YouTube shorts that are encouraging people to come over to different podcasts and different series that I have on my channel right now. And we're going to definitely go into why I create those things and how they can benefit you. Because that's why I'm sharing. I'm sharing because, like the Care Bears, I'm caring. And I truly do wish to support and be a part of something that's much better than the world we're living in right now. And so those video shorts that last very few seconds, they're 9 to 11 seconds apiece, and they're comical at times, and they utilize the inspiration of videos that I've personally taken myself. And, they're essentially a redirect into my podcast, whether it's my Do No Thing Challenge podcast or my Sean's Thoughts podcast or my I Forsee series podcast, or just overall fun little bits of Pokemon that I encourage you to welcome yourself home, because that's where we're going. And if you're here right now, perhaps even if you're unaware and you think you're here to distort this video, maybe you're here for another reason. Perhaps, chew on that for a bit. Anyways, so that was one of my most recent adventures with the YouTube AI, where I discovered that the audios and the actual words that I say can be remixed up. And anyways, we're not going to go into all that. Let's go into my first and foremost series, the series and the reason why you're here. It's because I created videos where I first started off by showcasing nature's pictures. And I originally, these videos were Aesop fables, where I would read these fables that had very insightful ideas to them. And essentially that evolved into using video as opposed to pictures. because I found the idea of filming moving photographs to be far more exciting for me anyways, rather than still. Rather than capturing something within the clutches of time and saying, well, what I saw, this is what you get to see. I started recording these 9 by 16 frames for those videos, for those Aesop fables, and I recognized that there was something more to it. And so I started to recognize the video and the beauty that I was capturing within those frames, and that they were essentially moving frames. And what that ended up being was Do No Thing Challenge series podcast, where I started to put up daily challenges, and I ran it under the tag of Can you catch them all? Can you view and spend all of that time within that moment of silence? And then I labeled it Do No Thing. And well, the whole concept around the no thing, because supposedly, there was a being referred to as the great no thing, it essentially dissuaded or, repelled a few people. And yet the whole presence or the whole purpose behind it was to promote stillness and presence and calmness. And this wasn't just for you, the viewer, it was also for me, because even my experience of creating those videos, it challenged me to remain calm and quiet and still and just be in the moment. So while those videos originally started at 1 minute, because YouTube's original idea of a short was a minute to 90 seconds, I believe, they eventually merged into 3-minute experiences where I took the beautiful music of Chris Collins' meditative experiences and I overlaid them on top of these beautiful frames that sometimes would just naturally fall into presence and into overall, like, beautiful. But challenge podcasts, we're gonna put right up here, and it'll be there when I upload this fully. And these videos are meant to take those moments of stillness to allow your bodily get rid of the cortisol and the stress, and perhaps bring you down a notch, or maintain that peacefulness and that stillness, because that stillness is where we connect with energies unseen, and where we essentially find ourselves and our peaceful tranquility all around us. So I highly encourage you to, check that out. There are many, many videos, and they showcase a lot of beautiful nature scenes. And, there's a few ones with animals and so many other different delights. And why I say that brought you here was because that was a giant step on the road that it took to get me sitting here on this tree stump right here, talking to you in a camera about the series. Because everything is an evolution, everything grows and changes, and that's what's important, is that the world is changing. Our beliefs are changing, our expectations of the illusions that we've lived with are changing. Our idea that the world is here somehow, for our pleasure, as opposed to perhaps we're here to be caretakers of this great ball of light that we're all sitting upon right now. And so, yeah, I highly recommend Do No Thing, or remain still and in presence, and experience those experiences that I've put. You can do them normal, you can do them in a stressful state. If you decide you want to experiment and, you use cannabis, for example, you can do them in those types of states. You can use them as full on meditations. I have some that go beyond the 3 minutes. So definitely go into my meditative playlist where I have highlighted, and we'll put that up right. And those are some of my longer meditations, including an assortment of the shorter ones. But put that playlist on and just let it run and experience what there is to experience, because meditation and remaining still and present and, hearing yourself, being in isolation, being comfortable with yourself within the quietness, and essentially, quietening that chatterbox voice that the book Untethered Soul often talks about, or mostly talks about. And so, moving on from there, I want to talk about something else before I get into what my Do No Thing Challenge series evolved into. I want to talk about one of my most exciting and original series. And I spoke about it in my podcast that I had recently. It's called Illuminating Language. Now, Illuminating Language is a series that I started off with my son originally on Rumble when I was essentially against using YouTube because I had my own thoughts about Google and whatever. Nonetheless, I created a series called Illuminating Language. Now, the language that we use in our lives has been distorted. The words have had their meaning changed, not just by, cultural norms and, fads and all of those things that we essentially say we're not really understanding what we're saying, and or we're using the word because there's been a new version of that word put out, like the word goat. Calling someone a goat now means something that's positive, and yet, there was a game called Goat Simulator where, in my opinion, they mocked a lot of things about our society within that game. It was fun, but there was other inferences in that. They've changed the word of gay and the word of faggot and the word of so many different things. Even the African American culture has turned negro into a completely, or Niger into a completely different fabrication of that word. And anyways, so my desire with Illuminating Language was to take a skill that I was learning about through my experience with the Global Intelligence Agent Network, and take words that were key that I had been guided to perhaps illuminate, and expanding on what those words really meant, what the synonyms of and the antonyms of those words were, the etymology, which means where did the word come from, where did it originate, which language did it originate. You see, English language, for example, we incorporate so many words from so many different spaces, like the word sushi, for example. It's not necessarily an English word. Well, it might not even be Japanese in a sense. And yet, my point being is that we incorporate all of these words. I talked about the word want, so go back and look in that in the other audio. And there's other words like, and anyways, there's different words that we co-created images, what were favorites of mine from series that I had done also called I Am the Love and Lust series, which I did take down. And yet the images, they were a lot of the creativity and the passion and the love within me. So I put all of these images together in this somewhat meditative expression of these words such as divine love and forgiveness and acceptance and wonder and other words. And I put that out there so that a person could put that video on and have a beautiful image to look at while they listened to what I was expressing, and that was illuminating, that was highlighting the true meaning of these words. And I definitely plan to illuminate a lot more words. I would love to bring that series into the forefront. It's something that's on my bucket to-do list, because this is a skill of increasing our ability to communicate using words that we truly know what they mean. And if we don't know what they mean, for instance, if you're reading a book and you get to a word that you're not aware of what that word means, going into a dictionary and illuminating that word before you continue on reading is, from my understanding and my own experience, of the utmost importance. Because as I understand it, when we get to a word and we don't know what that word means and we continue reading on, that perhaps our in brain recording device stops really understanding what we're talking about because it's caught on that word, as if it was in the water and it's caught at the bottom and it can't pull. And you think you're getting something and you're struggling as the fisherman, but yet there's something that you're unaware of that you're stuck on. And so that happens. So stopping when you're hearing or reading something and then going and looking up that word can be very advantageous and beneficial. Like the word awesome, go look that up, go illuminate that word, and perhaps we'll stop using that word as much as we use generally, or I have been programmed to use. Now, another series that I have, and I'm gonna pop that up right here, sure. I keep putting my fingers in the air as here because there's these things called cards on YouTube, and they essentially, when we're referring to other video content within the video, we can actually connect it. So if you don't want to go and stop the video right now, or it's not there right now, when you come back to this video after, you will see all of these playlists or podcasts. They will be in the description of this video. So you can go in the description, you can read what I really do put there for everyone's knowledge and insights. But at the bottom of the description of any of my videos, if I have linked a video, you can therefore go and quickly, easily find it. So once again, there is a series that I created called I Forsee. It's a visionary thinking series where I essentially entertain all of these wonderful, beautiful, glorious, God given, God deserved, God aligned, source aligned aspects of a reality that I would love to see and that I foresee coming to creation. Things such as maglev trains being all over the world, perhaps powered by batteries that, we don't need to use gas guzzling, diesel infused technologies. And I foresee, marketplaces where everyone comes together and trades. And, if we still need some sort of currency to exchange, that we are supporting one another directly without the interventions and the collections of fabricated taxes and fees and, rental property fees and lease fees. And, even when you have a farmer's market, there is money collected for all of those vendors. And, well, there definitely needs to be contributing to the local economies and to support the local areas. Perhaps farmers markets, as I had mentioned, could be turned into places that always exist all week long, and so that people can contribute. And there's an amazing video that I put up, and it talks about the living marketplace. So I'm not going to fully go into detail on that, but once again, I'm going to put my finger up here because these are all videos that are important and, highlight sovereignty and unity and collective consciousness and, coming together. And so that video that I just put up there, hopefully it'll be there sometime, is the living marketplace. And other ideas within my I Foresee series have to do with exploratoriums, bringing education back to educating rather than programming little office workers to grow up and, do things like the teacher says, like the office manager says, like the leaders that hide within corporations say, and perhaps higher beyond that. And so exploratoriums, the whole idea of that is bringing information back into the, grasp or the control of the community rather than having a provincial government. That's the way we're run, telling us what we can and cannot learn. And then having teachers themselves bring in, you know, topics such as politics into a grade 5 classroom, and even, training people how to vote. That happened in my son's classroom. They actually pretended and they did a mock voting where they voted on the politics that were going on, by the way, in America. Like they did. Anyways, crazy. But anyways, my I for Series podcast is all about exploring the possibilities. And that was a result of my podcast series called Possibilities, where I simply openly discussed what if scenarios. What if in the beautiful parts of our world, could we perhaps see a lot more than we were being perhaps permitted to or allowed to or limited to? And so both of those series, I Foresee and Possibilities, were experimental thought processes bringing in imagery and, love and compassion into, the collective consciousness, that I hope you will take the time. Those ones especially because one of my favorite videos is in there. And when I created it, I wrote on the wall of my own home that this video will have 1 million views because it's a video about the Care Bears. And those Care Bears have been fundamental in my upbringing, in my essential foundation of who I am. The ideas of love and the acceptance of everyone for who they are, with some of the Care Bears, one of them being grumpy and one of them being lucky and one of them being, Share Bear, and which is a nickname that people or someone had called my mom often, which she'd love to remind me about. And yeah, her name was Sharon. And so she, or her former partner would in the past have called her Share Bear. And anyways, so there is Lionheart Bear, and that definitely resonates with me as well, especially now that I have this big mane across my head. And that video showcased where the Care Bears are now after all those decades. I think it's been 3.5 decades since I first watched that show. I have recently watched it, and I was still blown away by the positive message. This positive message has only truly been permitted in the series Pokemon that I watch with my son. All of the other cartoons, they definitely push in a lot of, you know, trending morals and values, such as Paw Patrol and Peppa Pig. They seem to put in a lot of trending things that they want kids to know, but yet Care Bears was